All right, so let's see if we can update our user. Now, because we are introducing different things to our user object and everything in our database, just to avoid possible issues, what I'm going to do something drastic. I'm going to delete all of these users here. Yes, I'm going to go ahead and delete all of these users. So I'm going to click here, I'm going to delete users. I'm going to delete all of the users in that collection. And what I'm going to do also inside of our authentication, I'm also going to delete all of these guys just to start afresh. Delete. Now that we deleted the users collection, and also you can see in our authentication, we should have empty. So there's no authenticated users. We're going to start from scratch. So inside of our update user profile, this is where we update users. So in order for us to update a user, we need to get the document ID. What I mean by that is as follows. Let's go and find our user.dart. If you come back here, you can see that we do have this ID. We call it data.id. So we are passing into our user object. Remember, this is our user, customized user, not the Firebase user. We are passing that ID, which is going to be the document ID, which is going to be needed for us to delete, or in this case, also update that document, in this case, the user. It's very important. That's why we have this. So let's go back to our profile.dart. And here to update a user, we go to our update user profile.dart and we go to where we have this text update. So what we do here is we say Firebase Firestore.instance, and then I'm going to go and invoke the collection. And the collection we want to update, of course, is users. And then we need to go and pass the document ID, because remember, we need to know which document, in this case, which user we want to update. So how do we get the user ID? Well, we already have our object user, right? This one here, it's going to be passed through this class. So we can just use that by saying user dot. I'm going to pass the ID as such. And then we go ahead and invoke the update method like that. And you can see if you hover over the update method, it says here that it needs a map type because that is the type that is taken or that's used in the backend of Firestore, Cloud Firestore, to save the information. So for us, we could go ahead and just create a map as such, but we know better because remember, we do have our user.dart, which is a data class that has a few things. One of the things that it has is the constructor, which allows us to pass all of these fields. And we have this factory method that translates or transforms the document into an actual user object. And also we have this toMap, which we're going to use in a second here, that converts back into a map type, which is needed to save in the backend. So going back, in this case here, we're going to use the actual object because it's much easier. So I'm going to say muser like that, and I'm going to start invoking all of the fields that I need to populate. The first one is going to be the UI ID. To get the UI ID, we go through user dot. Remember, we're not getting the ID of this user. That's totally different. We are actually going to pass in the UI ID that is attached to each user that is created. If you pass the ID, you're going to have a lot of issues retrieving this information. So make sure that we are passing UI ID. Very important. And of course, it makes sense because we said that the field is UI ID, so we should get the UI ID. All right. I say this from experience because I've made a mistake of passing ID and then things didn't work, and that's never fun. Okay. And then display, I'm going to go ahead and say display controller, get the text value. Do the same thing to others. Avatar URL, in this case, is going to be avatar.text, and then profession. And I just now noticed that profession is spelled wrong, but as long as I'm able to get the information, that's totally fine. Okay, and then quote. Pass in on quote that text, like that. Very well. And right away you can see, because we have this extension that tells us something is wrong, it says here the argument type muser cannot be assigned to the parameter type map string like this. Okay, this tells us exactly what I just said, in that the update will not recognize this muser object because it needs to actually get fed an actual map. How do we do that? Well, we're just going to go right when we finish invoking this object muser. There, we can say dot and invoke the toMap method like this, right? Give it a save, and voila. Now this will be ready to update this user with this new information. All right, let's see if this works. Obviously, we have deleted all the users, so we have to create a new user. So let's go ahead and create an account. So I'm going to say, why not john.me.com. There we go, and let's create an account, and there it is. Okay, so I have John. If I click on John, there it is, John, everything is null. Now, there's one thing that you may find very interesting here is that some of these fields are null because, in fact, if I click here, now the only thing that is not null is the username because this is the first time this user created their account, so everything is null. The reason why we have this image for avatar is because in our code, we made sure that if it's null or there's no image, we just pull in a generic image. What's happening here? Let's go back to our code. There's something that I've changed. Let's go find the create user.dart. Okay. So the create user.dart, what we had before, it was something like this, which in fact is what you have so far. So what I did, without showing you, I apologize, but it's simple. What I did is I converted everything to make things a little bit better, if you will. Everything is the same. We are getting our collection users. We're getting our Firebase auth, the current person that's logged in, and we're extracting the UI ID for the current person that is logged in. Okay. And then what we do here, instead of passing in just a map, because we were just testing things, what I did here is that I created an actual object user. Okay. And I pass display name and the UI ID. Those are the two things that are very important. That's why we have the name. The UI ID you're not going to be able to see, but internally, if we go back to our backend here, refresh, you should be able to see that we have now users. And there is that user John and UI ID was created. Okay. So anything else, of course, is null or empty. Right. So that is what we do here. And then we say user collection that add, we add in the user, and we say user.toMap. So this simplifies our life because remember, this toMap is from our muser, right? Because this type, we can invoke this method called toMap, which converts our object user into a map. Again, which is exactly what's needed to save that information. And of course, in this case, we just return. This is future void, which means we don't return anything really. That's the only change I made it in lieu of having the muser object. All right, so moment of truth here, we need to update something. Let's say that John is a writer and producer of some sort. Favorite quote is arts rule. And for the avatar, we're not going to put anything for now. Let's go ahead and update and get out. You can see John is showing nothing because something changed. Notice actually avatar is not null anymore. It is empty. If it's empty in our code, we don't have any checks to check if the avatar URL is empty or not, right? So that's why it's just showing nothing there. But there is John. Now, if I click back here, you can see now John, there it is. There's no image. Writer, producer, arts, rule. Okay. I can go back and update again. Let's go ahead and have this avatar. I'm going to find from our place here, find this link here, this avatar, enter. Let's go ahead and update. And voila, you can see now you went ahead, the stream builder updated. Now John has an avatar, as you can see, there it is. Okay, so it is indeed working. Now there's a problem that we need to solve, which is as we update, right? Go back here and click John. When we update, it would be nice to only update the things that need updating. For instance, you notice that anything else, the second time we came around, case their name, profession, and favorite quote, none of these changed. The only thing that changed was the avatar URL. So it would be really nice to be able to only selectively change or update what changed, right? Because it makes no sense to trying to update something that is not changed. And it may seem trivial at the moment because we are talking about in smaller scale, but you can imagine if you have a lot of people using your app and they want to update, do all this writing in the back end, this can get real expensive. It will potentially take up a lot of data. So it is important to minimize the writing to the database as much as you can. So in the next video, what we're going to do is to selectively only update the fields that need to be updated.